Okay, picture this. You live in a world where everyone has superpowers. Your best friend can shoot lasers from their eyes, your neighbor can levitate their groceries, and even the family dog has a tail that controls the weather. And you? You got nothing at all. Just a regular person in a world of walking miracles. This is the world of the Powerless Protagonist, a character who's dropped into a universe full of magic, superpowers, and destiny without any of those things for themselves. And yet, they still find their own way to shine. And that's what makes them fascinating. These characters are people who are often tormented by their own narrative, either by their own horrible luck, the characters around them who are constantly putting them down, or just the narrative itself. And yet they still find a way to persist against the odds. They don't have the natural talent or inherited abilities of their peers. Most of the time, these characters have to rely on their own strengths, ingenuity, determination, and sheer willpower to carve out a name for themselves. This is probably one of my favorite character archetypes to explore in fiction. I mean, I think it speaks to a lot of people's biggest fear, being the odd one out. Everyone hates being left out of things, right? So how would it be if you were someone ordinary in a world of the extraordinary? But hold on. I should back up a bit. I am saying a lot of words about powerless protagonists, but it might not be quite obvious what I'm talking about when it comes to them. The powerless protagonist isn't a widely recognized trope, at least not one that I could easily find in my own research. There's not a strict definition of this character type, there's no defined roles, but this character does appear in stories. It's rare, but they are there, and something about them is so compelling, especially to me, and I can't believe no one has ever talked about them before. Because these characters, often the underdogs of their own stories, prove that power isn't the only thing that matters. These characters can challenge the idea that power is the only thing that matters, proving that creativity, resilience, and heart can be just as compelling. So what exactly defines a powerless protagonist? This is my own definition, so take it as you will, but a powerless protagonist is a character who exists in a world filled with the extraordinary, whether it's magic, superpowers, or something in between, yet they themselves have no special abilities. Despite this, they carve out their own place in the story, proving that strength isn't just about the power you were born with, but how you rise to the challenge. Their journey often explores themes of perseverance, self-worth, and redefining success on their own terms. They may struggle with being the odd one out, but in the end, their resilience and creativity and heart prove that there's more than one way to be a hero or to be someone great. It's a pretty encompassing definition, but I think it's easy to summarize into 4 types of powerless protagonists: the late bloomer, the inheritor, the student, and the black sheep. Each of these characters starts from a place of a disadvantage, but the way they navigate their world sets them apart. Some are simply waiting for their moment, some gain power through outside sources, some find entirely new ways to succeed, and some prove that they never needed power to begin with. By breaking them down into these 4 categories, I think we can better understand how different stories explore what it means to be strong, even without the traditional gifts of their world. Now, to explore these types, I want to look at 4 characters I think best exemplify the types of powerless protagonists. You could probably guess from the B-roll footage I've already shown and my thumbnail and maybe even the title, but I'm going to talk about an odd array of characters today. Will Stronghold, Midoriya Izuku, Luz Noceda, and Mirabel Madrigal. Each one represents a different take on the powerless protagonist, and by examining how their stories unfold, the challenges they face, and what ultimately makes them strong, we can break down what makes this trope so compelling. At least in my opinion. Okay, 4 characters, 4 different journeys. Let's just get started.
What do you mean you don't know what your power is?
Sky High is a very interesting movie to start with. It's a cult classic Disney original set in the titular Sky High, a high school for children of superheroes and supervillains. The school is divided into 2 classes: the heroes with the strong powers and the sidekicks who have powers that are, well, not as impressive. And here's where things get a little tricky. How do I put this gently? There's a not-so-subtle theme of eugenics going on, but don't worry, it's all played off as a joke. Because of course, teaching kids that if you don't have the right genetic makeup, you're destined to be a sidekick is hilarious, right? It's like, hey, your powers are mediocre at best. Better start practicing with your coffee fetching skills. Anyway, Our main character is Will Stronghold, the son of two of the most powerful heroes of all time, the Commander and Jetstream. Despite this, Will has yet to show any sign of inheriting either of his parents' epic powers, super strength, or flight. Instead, he's just completely incredibly normal. Because of this lack of powers, Will is assigned to sidekick classes at first, a fact he tries to hide from his parents for as long as possible. Will does have some pretty big shoes to fill. He's the son of two well-known legendary heroes, and everyone expects him to be just as extraordinary. For most of the movie, he's weighed down by the pressure of expectations he can't meet. That is until, plot twist, he gets into a fight with one of the minor antagonists of the film, a guy named War and Peace. And yeah, what a name, right? In the heat of the battle, Will somehow manages to pick up an entire cafeteria table and toss it at Warren like it's a paperweight. Suddenly, Will's got some serious strength. This moment catapults him into the hero class, where he leaves his sidekick friends behind and starts to feel like he finally belongs somewhere. Or does he? In his new hero class, Will meets and befriends Gwen, a girl with the power to control technology. Things take a wild turn during Homecoming when it's revealed that Gwen is a supervillain that Will's dad defeated in the 1980s. And get this, she was turned into a baby by one of her own inventions. Yeah, these Disney Channel original movies get really strange sometimes. In the end, Will and his sidekick friends manage to save the day, but not before Will discovers another shocking thing about himself. He's also inherited his mom's ability to fly. When Sky High's floating island loses its technology and starts plummeting to the ground, Will uses his newfound powers to save the day, catching the giant floating castle in the sky before it crashes and flying it back up into the air.
That could have been messy.
Obvious allusions to Superman aside, Will is an interesting character because he is a very well-known example of the late bloomer powerless protagonist. He has powers, he just doesn't have them yet at the start of his story. And while this isn't my favorite of the four types, I can admire the late bloomer for what it sets out to be. The late bloomer is an exploration of growth, maturity, and a coming-of-age narrative. In many ways, Will's journey through Sky High highlights his struggle to find his identity in a world where expectations are already set high due to his lineage, but he's put at the very end of the line due to his lack of power. It really dissects this idea that growth takes time and everyone grows at their own different pace. Will's powers don't manifest until he's already in high school. Meanwhile, most of his friends and peers have had them for a much longer time. And alright, we do need to talk about the weird thing in Sky High. Will's powers don't just show up, they arrive on cue like they've got a dramatic entrance planned. It's not a grand discovery, it's a perfectly timed plot device, as if the universe itself checked the script and said, yep, time for this kid to be important now. Because I think the late bloomer character can be an empowering narrative, even if I'm not a big fan of it comparatively, but the way it's done in Sky High isn't the best in my opinion. Sky High is the most visible example, but just because it's the most visible example doesn't mean it's done the best. Will's development as a character is only validated when his powers manifest. It suggests that his value and the value of everyone else in this universe is ultimately defined by what he does than who he is. And that's where this movie accidentally steps into some really awkward territory, like, oh no, did we just stumble into eugenics propaganda? Jack Saint here on YouTube made a video years ago about this.
I saw Sky High and I thought, you know what? Yeah.
And I don't want this section to take over this video, so I'll just recommend that instead. The idea in Sky High that people with stronger powers and better genetics are inherently more valuable than those with weaker powers or no powers is incredibly eugenicsy. And it's played as something completely natural in this world. Those with the strong powers are heroes, those with the lesser abilities are just the sidekicks. And even at the end of the film, when these sidekicks and Will are the ones to save the day, they're not really treated that different at the end. For the most part, the status quo remains unchanged. Do I think Disney sat down and said, you know what this superhero movie needs? A sprinkle of eugenics? No. Do I think it's weirdly baked into the story anyway? Yeah, kind of. And it is fun to see Will finally get his powers and step into the hero class, but it kind of leaves this weird aftertaste. Will's self-acceptance is ultimately tied to his newly discovered abilities, and this reinforces the idea that personal growth and identity are inseparable from what one can achieve, rather than who they inherently are. The film's treatment of powers as both a literal and metaphorical marker of worth highlights how the narrative could be perceived as undercutting its own message of self-acceptance, and it creates this conflict between the story's themes of perseverance and its implicit endorsement of power as a prerequisite for true success and recognition. And while his delayed powers are meant to represent his coming-of-age narrative and personal growth, they also imply that his success is only attainable when he's fully powered up. Self-worth should stem from internal growth, not external ability. By tying Will's journey so close to his powers, Sky High ends up almost accidentally reinforcing the idea that real acceptance is only possible when one is genetically destined for greatness, which I think undercuts the message of self-acceptance one can get from the idea of the late bloomer. The late bloomer archetype can be an awesome metaphor for growth. Sky High handles it less like a proper journey and more like a light switch flipping, waiting for the right time until Will's inevitable greatness kicks in, but it can be done well. A character who doesn't have any powers at the beginning but later has them manifest in moments of personal growth, that can be done well. It can be so much fun to explore that. In the end, the late bloomer archetype focuses on the idea that growth takes time. Everyone's journey is different. It's not about speedrunning success, but finding it at your own pace and growing into who you're truly meant to be. The growth is the main highlight of the late bloomer story, embracing the process of learning and change and showing us it's never too late to find our strength and purpose. Sure, the late bloomer might stumble along the way, but that's okay. Sometimes, the most incredible things happen when we least expect them.
Eat this!
So, Will's story is all about waiting for power to arrive like a delayed package. Frustrating, but it eventually shows up. But what if that protagonist never had that package coming? No amount of waiting, training, or sheer determination will unlock their hidden potential, because there isn't any. But that's where the Inheritor kind of comes in. Instead of discovering a power from within themselves, they receive it from an outside source, usually with a hefty price tag of expectations, responsibilities, and or downright life or death stakes. And few characters embody that better than Izuku Midoriya from My Hero Academia. Yeah, I'm talking about anime today. 80% of the population in My Hero Academia has a quirk, a power completely unique to them. Some people can create explosions in their hands, other people can control and remove gravity from objects, and other people are just straight up frogs. But there's about 20% of the population who doesn't have a cool power. That 20% is known as quirkless, and our main character, Izuku Midoriya, is quirkless. Despite his lack of power, Izuku wants to become a hero, just like his idol, the current #1 hero, All Might. The main problem, though, society has already written him off. He's bullied, ridiculed, and told over and over and over again that without a quirk, Izuku can't ever be a hero. He studies, taking detailed notes on heroes and quirks, analyzing their techniques, and he tries to find a way to be a hero in a world that tells him there is no place for him. Even when he first meets All Might, his hero, he is told to be realistic with his dreams. But Izuku's greatest strength isn't power, it's his determination. He doesn't really want to be a hero for fame or fortune. He wants to save people and be the kind of hero that people can really count on. His determination against all odds is what catches All Might's attention. All Might sees something about Izuku that no one else does. Izuku has the heart and instincts of a true hero, someone who moves before they can think to save someone. That moment inspires All Might, not just to act and save someone, but to choose Izuku to be his successor and gives him his own quirk, One for All. One for All is a special quirk. It's a quirk that can be passed between people, and it not just carries the power of the previous holders, but the will, the sacrifices, and struggles of anyone who's ever wielded it. Izuku isn't just inheriting the strength, he's inheriting a legacy. Of course, inheriting the power doesn't magically make Izuku strong and unstoppable. Unlike his peers, those who were born with quirks, they've basically had their whole life. Izuku suddenly has an ability his body was never meant to have. When he first gets One for All, he's breaking his bones, like shattering them to the point that it's recommended he avoid using his arms for combat after he breaks them too many times. His journey isn't about instant power, it's learning to control One for All and find ways to fight even when his new power is working against him. His struggle with this is what makes Izuku such a compelling character. He finds creative ways to win, creative ways to use his quirk. He pushes himself through immense pain just to chase his dreams of becoming a hero, and he uses his brains and his bronze to do that. The Inheritor archetype, as seen through Izuku, hammers home the difference between earned strength and natural talent. Izuku isn't like his peers. He's not born special, and he doesn't inherit greatness genetically. He has to work for everything he's got, challenging this whole idea of destiny. He doesn't just have to master one for all, he has to prove he deserves it, that he belongs alongside his peers and not someone behind them. It's a very compelling story that I think a lot of people can relate to. And the Inheritor isn't about being weak, it's more about responsibility and working to earn the power. It's rewriting a predetermined destiny and making destiny look at them while they earn it. But of course, the Inheritor has its own pitfalls like every other archetype and can be written horribly. A big thing I think to note about Inheritors is that they can often receive the immense power without earning it, even if they struggle to control it. Some characters that are given something world-shaking with no effort truly earn it. In My Hero Academia, Izuku had to go through about 9 months of grueling training under All Might just to even be given the power of One for All to begin with. And even then, he couldn't control it for a long time. His bones would keep breaking and the power was out of control until he found a creative way to handle it and make it his own. And the Inheritor can also get a little repetitive. Oh no, my bones broke again for the 7th time in 3 episodes. Repetition is fine in narrative, but sometimes having a character be such a glass cannon can be boring after a while, unless they actually start exploring the consequences of constantly breaking their body under their new power. Izuku has to completely rethink his fighting style after a while because of how many times he's broken his arms. But when the Inheritor starts mastering their power on their own, and that holy crap, they're strong now moment, chef's kiss, that always hits perfectly. When looking at the Inheritor, we can explore an idea that greatness is passed down as characters step into pre-established roles as some sort of legacy. But the true strength of the Inheritor is not in the power they're given, but what they do with it. It's about getting a legacy and making it meaningful in your own way. It shows us that stepping into big shoes doesn't mean we have to follow the same path as our mentors. It's adding our own unique story in the process. It's not just what's passed down, but what you do with it.
Wow. How is she doing that?
I don't know, but she did it all on her own.
Luz Noceda is just an ordinary human girl. She's quirky, obsessed with fantasy books, and struggles to fit in with her peers. Her mom, worried about Luz's social standing and future, decides that sending her to a normal summer camp will help her grow up. But while waiting for the bus, Luz chases a peculiar owl through a magical door and stumbles into a new world, the Boiling Isles, a realm full of monsters, demons, and witches. Magic isn't just real, it's everywhere. The very land pulses with magic energy, and every witch Luz meets can wield incredible powers with ease. It's like something out of one of her fantasy books, and everything she's ever dreamed of. Except there's one small problem. Luz isn't a witch herself. She doesn't have the magical bile sac in her body that helps witches catch spells. She's just human. First, this seems like an insurmountable force, but Luz is an unstoppable object about to meet the immovable force, and she decides she's going to learn magic anyway in whatever way she can. She begs her mentor, the infamous owl lady Ida Clothorn, to help teach her. Ida is hesitant at first, but Luz's enthusiasm and curiosity convinces Ida to take her under her wing, metaphorically and literally in some cases. And after all, witches cast magic differently back in the old days, and while Ida doesn't know how, surely they can find a way for Luz to cast magic too. It doesn't seem like it's going to be possible though, until a breakthrough in the 4th episode in the series. A boiling rainstorm keeps Ida, Luz, and King inside the titular owl house, but a strange, monstrous intruder starts to threaten the lives of King and Luz, with Ida nowhere in sight. As King and Luz hide from the owl beast, which turns out to be Ida herself suffering through a curse, Luz discovers something on her broken phone. Earlier that day, Ida had cast a small light spell for Luz to record, and the broken phone screen glitches, showing an odd symbol. Luz copies the symbol, and when she touches it, a small orb of light materializes from the paper. It's the first time Luz casts a spell on her own, using a glyph from the natural world around her to do so. Luz exemplifies the student archetype, a character that starts from nothing and earns power through effort and ingenuity. Unlike the Inheritor, whose power is bestowed through an outside force, the student acquires every single skill through perseverance, curiosity, and studying. They might have a mentor to help guide them, but their biggest strength comes from learning, adapting, and overcoming the obstacles on their own. Over the course of the series, Luz discovers even more glyphs representing the different elements like ice, plants, and fire. And she's not just learning about the glyphs. Luz pushes the boundaries of what they can do. She learns how to combine different glyphs to create incredible effects, like turning invisible or creating safety nets for people to land on when they're falling. Unlike witches who rely on the magic they're born with, Luz has to learn every step in a completely new way. It's almost like a science to her, observing, experimenting, and redefining methods to work with her natural lack of skill. Every new glyph and every new spell is something Luz earns, not just through luck, but hard work and dedication and passion for learning how to do it. Her own story isn't without struggles, of course. She struggles with self-doubt when her friends receive Talisman, magical companion that reflects their true selves, and she doesn't have one. She struggles when they're put back into the human world because her glyphs don't work there, and she has no way to defend herself. And her curious, trusting nature leads Luz to accidentally helping Emperor Belos, the same man who is her enemy. But every setback and failure doesn't stop her for long. She learns from her mistakes. The student is similar to the Inheritor, where the power isn't originally there, it's earned. Unlike the Inheritor, who is given a power by an outside force, the student learns it themselves. They might have a mentor to help them, of course, but they start from nothing and work for everything. And it's incredibly satisfying to watch because every victory and discovery feels very well deserved. Students also have to compensate with their lack of natural ability with intelligence, creativity, and resourcefulness because they're not often the strongest. They have to use creative problem solving and approach challenges in unexpected ways. The student is also just really uplifting and inspiring to watch. It tells the audience that anyone can grow. It's a perfect coming-of-age story that explores the idea that you don't have to be born special, you just have to put in the effort to build up the skill. And every failure is just another step towards success. We're all constantly learning and growing, even after we've long graduated from school, so the student tends to be very relatable. I don't think it's without problems, though. Students have to start from scratch, so their progress can sometimes feel too slow, but then too fast at the same time. If they stay weak for too long, they might not feel effective as protagonists. The audience might lose interest. But on the other hand, if the student learns too quickly and never fails, the growth might feel too easy, making them feel unrealistic. A delicate balance is necessary for the student to actually flourish as a powerless protagonist. The student can also sometimes just never fully succeed. They might have small wins, but never any big ones that are meaningful. If they constantly struggle while others succeed, it can get annoying after a while, and the audience might lose interest again. And if they're unable to gain the confidence they need to be the awesome, powerless protagonist they are, they can feel stagnant after a while. By the time watching and dreaming the series finale comes along, Luz isn't just someone who's learned magic, she's redefined it in her own way. Her greatest victory isn't just defeating Emperor Belos and saving both realms, it's proving to herself and to the world that she belongs. Luz earns her place through her dedication, intelligence, and love for magic. Even when her original glyph language fades away, she doesn't see it as the end, it's just a new beginning. There are new glyphs to uncover, new lessons to learn, and new challenges to overcome. And true to the student archetype, Luz is ready to keep learning. The student teaches us that growth is a never-ending journey, and we're always going to be evolving, learning new skills, and experiencing more perspectives. Students don't start with power, but their determination and curiosity gives them the ability to learn how to do it in their own unique way. They might not do it in the same way as their peers, but they find a way to harness power or magic for themselves, exploring a very unique perspective along the way. And that unique perspective makes them stand out, developed through their determination to learn, adapt, grow, and explore new things. Through their own journeys, students show us that sometimes the greatest power comes from the ability to keep evolving, learning, and finding your own way.
I call it the not special, since, you have no gift.
When Disney's Encanto hit theaters in 2021, it took the world by storm with its heartfelt story of family, self-discovery, and healing. Lin-Manuel Miranda's music shone through with songs like We Don't Talk About Bruno and The Family Madrigal, captivating the eyes and ears of audiences. Combined with the dazzling animation and vibrant character design, this movie was honestly the last movie with pure Disney magic in it that we've had. At the heart of Encanto is the Madrigal family, all blessed with extraordinary gifts from a magical miracle candle that has protected their home for many years. Super strength, healing, shapeshifting. Every member receives a unique power when they come of age, except for Mirabel Madrigal. Unlike the rest of her family, Mirabel never received a gift of her own. Her own ceremony was disrupted when her magical door faded away. She grows up as the odd one out, never moving out of the nursery into a room of her own, unnoticed and ignored by the rest of her family in a world where a magical gift defines one's role and value. Throughout the film, Mirabel wrestles with a place in the family she deeply cares and loves for. Throughout the film, Mirabel wrestles to find a place in a family she deeply cares and loves for. She tries to help out wherever she can, trying to keep up with her sisters and cousins, but where their gifts bring them admiration and respect, Mirabel is left behind. When her younger cousin Antonio receives gifts of his own, Mirabel is accidentally left out of a family photo, but she begins to discover cracks, both literal and metaphorical, forming in Casita, their magical home, and within her family. During her quest for answers, she discovers things she would never expect. Her oldest sister, Luisa, is suffering under the pressure of being the strong one. Her other older sister, Isabella, is struggling with the identity of being the golden child, who is expected to marry a man she doesn't even love. These impossible expectations are being placed on their family by their grandmother, Abuela Alma, who has placed so much importance on their gifts and how they help the community that she's failed to see the emotional toll it's taking on her family. When Mirabel finally confronts Abuela, the foundations begin to completely break the family. Casita collapses, the family loses their gifts, and even when Mirabel risks her life to save their miracle candle, she feels more like she ruined everything than tried to save anything. Mirabel runs off, and her abuela eventually finds her and tells her the story of the moment Casita formed, when her husband Pedro sacrificed himself when they were escaping from violence many years ago. His sacrifice brought them their greatest gift, the miracle, and she had been, mostly unintentionally, putting pressure on her family so that her husband's sacrifice was not in vain, and to distract herself from the pain of losing him. Despite how Mirabel had been pushed aside and ignored, Mirabel embraces her abuela in a hug, signalizing the want to move on and heal together with the rest of her family. The Madrigals reunite and rebuild Casita, and when Mirabel finally feels fully accepted in her family, even with her lack of gift, it brings the miracle back to life, and the family becomes whole again. You see, Mirabel is a very interesting character. Her journey isn't about unlocking some hidden ability or proving she belongs by gaining or learning about magic on her own. Instead, it's showing that her worth isn't and should not be tied to a supernatural gift. It comes from who Mirabel is. She is the one that reaches out to her family when she notices the cracks and sees them struggling. She is the one that helps her family rebuild metaphorically and literally. Mirabel reminds her family that their worth is not tied to their gifts, it's tied to their love and support for another. So her powerless protagonist archetype is probably one of my favorites. It's the black sheep, a character who exists in a world of the extraordinary without a power of their own, who never gets a power. There's no magic coming in at the last moment, no inheriting from an outside force, there's no learning a new way. Her true strength is defined by her lack of a magical gift. Her not fitting the perfect mold of the Madrigal family is what helps her the most. While her siblings and cousins are celebrated for their gifts and how they help the community, Mirabel is quietly nudged to the side, an outsider of her own family. Of course, her family loves her. Her mother is doing her best, her father is caring, but there's an underlying disappointment that comes from her existence. For most of the movie, Abuela tolerates her, and her sister Isabella is pretty antagonistic with her sometimes. She doesn't fit in with the family, but that outsider perspective is what gives her the most strength. Where the Madrigals are defined by their gifts, Mirabel isn't defined by anything. She doesn't have the same pressures they do. She is allowed to just be. And with her just being, it allows her to see Luisa buckling under the expectation of being the strong one, to see Isabella suffocating by perfection. Her unique perspective of her family is what helps her, in the end, to reunite everyone again. And I don't want to sound too biased here, but the black sheep is my favorite archetype, if you can't tell. I just think it provides a unique experience and perspective to stories with powerless protagonists. They don't have a power, and they never get one, and they have to work with their own strengths to prove themselves to not just the people around them, but to themselves. They're also probably the most relatable to audiences. How many times have you felt like you were left out, you don't fit in, or you aren't special enough? The struggle with identity and finding a place in a world built against them is pretty universal, especially between minority groups. I guess one thing people might struggle with when engaging with this archetype is the lack of immediate award. While Mirabelle's family does get their gifts back in the last few minutes of the film, she is still left without one. The black sheep's growth isn't tied to anything physical or visual. She won't get a power of her own or gain her own magic through studying or inheriting it. It's an internal exploration of character instead, with the focus on emotional and mental growth, and it's just not visually satisfying as the other tropes. It could also be said that the character motivations for a black sheep might tend to revolve more around proving their worth to the people around them or finding a place where they belong. It's relatable, sure, but it's important for people to write it in unique ways too. Granted, there aren't actually a lot of black sheep that I could find that don't end up training their physical body to give them an advantage around their extraordinary peers like, Bruce Wayne, but the black sheep archetype is, in my opinion, the funnest way for writers to dive deep into emotional journeys and explore big themes when it comes to writing a powerless protagonist. It gives the characters a chance to stand out and show that the real strength often comes from being true to yourself rather than any magical gifts or flashy superpowers. But like every other story, you gotta balance it out too. The black sheep can challenge expectations and teach us that we still have ways to be extraordinary while still keeping us kind of ordinary. So we've explored what it means to be a powerless protagonist. For some, like Will Stronghold and Izuku Midoriya, it's just a temporary obstacle, something they'll eventually overcome with genetic luck or being given it, basically. Will spends much of his early life in a world where superpowers determine social standing, and his struggle is rooted in expectation. He's the son of two legendary heroes, yet he initially shows no powers of his own. His journey isn't just about gaining abilities, but learning that true heroism isn't measured by his strength alone. Similarly, Izuku Midoriya grows up in a world where power is everything in society, but he is born without one. Instead, he is gifted a quirk, inheriting it from the number one hero, but his greatest strength is his determination and intelligence, rather than just his raw power. For others, like Luz Nocera, it's a challenge they need to work around, problems that require study, creativity, and perseverance. She's destined to develop magical abilities through genetics, and while she is technically given magical powers in the finale, that isn't what her journey is about. Luz learns magic through creativity, study, and believing in herself. Her journey isn't about proving that she's like everyone else, there's no right way to be a witch, and redefining what it means to wield magic. Mirabelle Madrigal takes this one step further. She never gains a magical gift of her own, and that's precisely the point. And in Kanto, Mirabelle's true power comes from her deep emotional connection and understanding of her family, the empathy that she has for the people she loves, and how she reunites everyone around her in the end. And sometimes, power isn't about what you lack, but what you bring to the table in ways that others might not immediately see. At the end of the day, it isn't about what you're given by genetics or someone else, it's about how you use what you have. Whether you're a late bloomer, an inheritor, a student, or the black sheep, you can still be the hero of your own journey with what skills you already possess. Even when everything seems stacked against you, the ability to adapt, persist, and carve your own path forward is your own strength. And that strength isn't about winning every battle, it's refusing to give up even when the fights are hard. And maybe you're not in a world of superheroes or magic, but you've probably felt like the odd one out before, maybe even more than once. Like everyone has something special you don't, like maybe you're some sort of imposter. But you don't need superpowers to be super. The qualities that make you different also make you extraordinary. And yeah, that might sound a little cheesy, but you know what? Sometimes a little bit of cheese is what we need. Woo, that's another video done. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Do you guys have any thoughts and opinions about the Powerless Protagonist? Have any characters of your own you think would fit into any of these categories and archetypes? Or do you have something I might have forgotten? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to see discussions. And yeah, that's it for this video. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time. Keep your head in the clouds and have a great day.